Welcome to the Confessional Close-Up. My name is Christine Cisneros, and I'm so pleased that you are joining me here. Hello, Patriots. It's October 13th, 2020, Tuesday, and we are just a little more than a couple of weeks away from this huge election that we're coming to. This time, I would say election and decision that all of us are going to make about what is next for our planet, for our country, for our families, and for ourselves. As you know, in the past episodes, I've been talking about relationship a lot. And the reason that I'm talking about that so much is because it's really important, I think, to remember why we're here. We are here on the planet in this DNA package, in this DNA recipe, to have the relationship with God as we are in this human form, to have the relationship with ourselves, of course, and to have a relationship with each other. Everything else is furniture. Everything else, it's not that it's not to be appreciated, that our resources aren't to be looked at and that we're grateful for. But in order to be grateful for resources, we must be grateful for the source. And the source, of course, is God. And the way that we were designed is to actually be cognizant and aware as humans here on the earth and how we are in juxtaposition and in cooperation with each other. The reason I think this is so important as well is that as we move, and many people are saying and talking about this transhumanism that we are now moving into, and I've been talking about that for a while too, on my radio show, on the air, on terrestrial radio, and on this channel. People have been speaking about transhumanism because it's becoming more undeniable, shall I say. It's very, very clear that that is the agenda, to move us into, shuffle us into areas where we are no longer virtue signaled. We are no longer shamed even. We aren't even given ultimatums in relationships. I've heard so many stories in the last months, but particularly in this time, about relationships in families and between each other, friends, even in marriages and things like that, between parents and children, falling apart. And some of it I've heard recently. There are stories of relationships being intentionally dismantled due to differences of opinion and differences of ideas around how our freedom is and should be played out. I also want to reiterate that as patriots, as conservatives predominantly, I would say, and as people that are interested in shaping our own future, a lot of us will have different ideas about what that means for each and every one of us and our families. However, what we can see in a majority of these that are following the dark agenda may not even be cognizant that they are. However, they are moving in lockstep. And the primary way that this has been employed is through fear, of course, and conditioning through the canal of fear. And so when we find that there is a momentum, that there is a surge that occurs, and that anytime anything happens where they are maybe momentarily defeated or something has fallen through, a bridge has been blown up to the next shore that they're going to, what we find is that they quickly repair and move on. Now, aside from why that is or how they do it, or maybe even what those reasons are that propel them to do it, what we find is that they are highly efficient. Their efficacy level is huge because they move together and they do not accept any setback as the final word. I would never advise patriots to fashion themselves after the ideology of a dark agenda. I would never say that we should follow a satanic way of thinking. However, what we can find in this efficacy is that as we have our different ideas, as we have our moments of what each of us want our futures to hold, we must come together and act together on the very basics of what it is to protect the infrastructure through which we enact our liberties. I remember the first time I went to a store without a mask and was confronted. Throughout the discussion of what is actually legal, what isn't. I remember the person saying, "I'm done arguing with you." And what we can all know is that there is no argument. The argument was had in 1776. And since then, there have been challenges to our liberties, and there have been very, very large challenges to our country, some of which we came out of very well, and some of which we succumbed to some of the dark agenda. We do have these moments in our history that we can learn from, definitely. But what we know is that our country is the dream of our lineages. Our country is the place where God best can enact our expression of our liberty. That this is the place that though we sometimes find imperfections, we find pieces of our history that are not so preferable, that it is our responsibility, especially when we find those moments, to create a way to protect the infrastructure. I've relayed many times that our freedom never needs to be protected. However, our liberties do. And that's because we are born as freedom. We are the freedom that God created us to be. Our liberties are how we express our freedom. So, for instance, if you broke your arm and you couldn't move it the way that you remembered maybe 10 minutes ago or 10 seconds ago, the reason that you know the difference is because your arm was created to move, to act, and to serve you in a certain way. When that liberty has been obstructed, when that liberty has been truncated, you then can feel how your freedom cannot express through the liberty you once had. And you have to wait a while to regain that liberty, and it takes a considerable amount of effort, time, patience, and nurturing. This is natural law and the law of God. We have our freedom because we are our freedom. The liberty that we are enjoying in this country and the liberties that we have set up to further protect the expression of others' freedom as well through liberty is really, this is what we are actually talking about. I've had several discussions this week, and what kept coming up in these discussions was some worry, some doubt, some questions about what's next. What do you think? Do you think he'll win? What is going to happen? And what I have to say, and what I have said in some of these discussions, is that there's always a chance that one of the many potentials that we can see, and some of those that we can't, will come to pass. However, what we can realize at this point is that the origin, perhaps, of those questions lies deeply embedded in whether or not we are doing what we can right now, whether we are examining in our own lives how we can improve our moving together to protect this infrastructure. I was asked by another person, what if we don't make it? What if we don't? What if we don't even make it to survive physically these next trials? Will our death reflect the effort, the cooperation, and the refusal to see humanity as a liability in relationship, in DNA, and in community? If it should pass, that we should pass out of this life, will we be able to do that with the knowledge, the realization, and the comfort in knowing that we did what we could when we could do it, and we did as much as we could? None of us are perfect, and none of us know every single aspect of what is possible for us to do. However, that then points to what our job initially is, and that is finding out, what can I do to secure my home? What can I do to secure my neighborhood and whatever level of relationship I have with other people around me? What can I do to set things up and plan so that reciprocation is actually even possible in relationships? What can I do to draw closer, most importantly, to God, so that these threats of sickness, pain, suffering, and death do not become the markers of how I will next act in order to either avoid those things or to fall prey to the promises of earthly rewards and recognition through this tumultuous time? In this past week, I have been profoundly reminded that no matter what, quote, side you are on or where you stand, that people are people. We are all people. And that some of these propensities to balk against perceived authorities in order to be the authority, these ways in which we talk about are looking forward to the disintegration of prisonership only to entertain thoughts at holding others to our obligation and in service of what we have. And the ways that I hear often, those who want to find others that are, quote, like-minded, only to act like so many stations and networks in the media that jockey for ratings rather than truth. I've been doing a lot of thinking about content versus context. And indeed, there has been quite a change for me in context, as I am no longer at a radio station here in Seattle, Washington. My attempt to bring you content within this infrastructure has required that I learn, that I become someone that understands how little I have educated myself about technology and a completely different way of bringing my message into the world. Those that have helped me with this have been generous, kind-hearted, and magnanimous in their assistance, their knowledge, and their love. And what I know is that I will be there for them to assist and administer in any way I can, not because I feel as though I am indebted to them, but because I realize that they were first to initiate cooperation and the promotion not of me, but of the work that we are doing together. As we have talked about in these episodes, there is not going to be a returning to normal. So many want to curl up back into the glow of the past and the firelight from the destruction of our country. Some who are blind to that what was producing the heat and glow and firelight, and some who are indifferent to it. And I can finally say, through all of the changes, drastic changes that I've had this year, that I, for one, am very glad that we will not be returning to the normal that we used to have. For that normal led to this. And this is the time to be looking at each other, looking at our investment in what future we will have, and understand that we will determine what is next for our country and our planet. We can no longer assess the value of what we can get from another person based on the context of what we see. For this kind of strip mining out of relationships is what led to this kind of infection and destruction. Rather, what kind of future will we have if we look at others and see where we can actually serve, become the initiators of cooperation, and make a plan to work together, to move together, so that what does come to fruition is something that we can close our eyes for the last time and know that we are fulfilled in our purpose as it is calibrated to the will of God, which is always done. I have found that in my life, I have been guilty of wanting others to interact with me and to be on board, so to speak, with me the way that I am. What I have learned that has increased my skill in being cooperative is to not wait for the disappointment of not being cooperated with, but to assess where best to invest my cooperation as I am met with reciprocity. Is this not in conjunction with the free will that God designed us with? That just because we can doesn't mean we should, and that if we are to reap the benefits that will come to pass from our great Lord and Savior, that we must prepare ourselves to meet God at least halfway. Why would that be different for any of us here together? Have a great day, Patriots.